a second. Got it. There's one more that has to pop up too. We'll get that. Yep, good to go. There it is. The meeting is being live streamed. We got that too. All right, well, let's just take a moment and come to standing. And align ourselves between heaven and earth. And let's bow in. Wanagashmas. So let's start with some breathing. Let's step down, take a breath from the earth, reach up to the heavens, and then radiate out to the world, positive energy. And reaching to the earth, to the sky, and sending good energy to everyone who's struggling out there. And let's work with our containment breath as we inhale. Let it build in the hara, 1 point, and then slow release. And then dropping down into our hips, a little focusing into our hara. We're working on the 1 point today. So let's have a sense of radiating out from a universe inside our abdomen. And it flows out through our arms and fingertips. And invite a little more to come through us, a little more ki. Nice, and then let's stop for a moment and just stand in it and see if we can sense the ki flowing around us and through us. And now let's stretch our sides. And all the way around. And reversing. Now let's stretch out our low backs. Let's drop in a shoulder and twist around. Other side. And again. Okay. Now let's do circles with our hips. And both ways. And our knees. Both ways. Stretching the backs and the front. And again. Okay. Let's start with our hand warm-ups. We'll start with Aikido. And let's settle down, lengthen up, strong hips, and open our hearts. Other side. Kodesh. And Mikio. And inside of the arms. Shaking them out over our heads, letting everything vibrate, and drop them 3 times. And again. And drop them. Big circles with the arms. And the shoulders. And then let's use our elbows to work our core a little bit. Loosen that up. Okay, triangle. And let's, as we do the triangle, last week we worked a little bit on the weight underside thing. So let's just swing it a few times like we did, and then come up into the triangle and just have a sense, as we did last week, that our arms are hollow and they're just, there's no weight. Yeah. And then let's drop the one hand and we'll go together and back, together and back. And see if you can, we talked about extending ki last week from a sense that we weren't feeling our body. It was weightless and that we were flowing energy through us. Weight underside is part of it. It's a balance between centrifugal and gravitational. And now let's focus way out on a point and imagine from behind us, the ki flows through us, through our arms and out to a point. And there's a weightlessness to it, which makes all kinds of room for ki to flow through us. A few more. One more. Good. And then let's just stand in it for a moment. As we stand, let's see if we can recover that sense that there was an equal up and down, and that we weren't concentrating on the weight in our body, we were concentrating on the sense of the space around us, balance between centrifugal and gravitational. Let's do a few 2 steps and see if we can keep that same sense as we turn. There's a sense of weightlessness. And because of that, we're relaxed and there's all kinds of room for ki to flow through us. Because there's no density to stop the ki from flowing. And the ki is rising up from the earth, flowing down from the sky, all around us in the space. And it connects us to all things. Two more. And then let's stop for a moment and just stand in it. See if we can stay with that sense of weightlessness, flow coming through us. And so let's, rather than doing the rowing the way we did it before. Let's do that feeling where we just let it come. And just that sense, the shoulders are very relaxed. And then hold it for a minute, just do one and hold it. And see if you can have a sense that there's flow coming through you, and that because there's a weightlessness, there's all this room for ki to flow through. And then we organize it with our concentration. And let's do it another round. So just let it fall and come up, and it touches, the fingers touch. As we do this, there's a softening around the jaw and the shoulders. We'll talk about this in a minute, but don't have weight in your feet. Don't put weight in your legs. Just let all of this flow through you. And then one more, and then we'll hold and hold. And as you hold, try to sense the ki flowing out through all of that and around it. Nice, okay. So we've been playing with these principles of extend ki, keep weight underside, and keep one point is another one of the 4 principles. I'm going to read some stuff that I found online, and then we'll have a little talk about it and add a little of my own thing. So the one point is not a physical space in the typical sense of the word, but rather a point within the body upon which the calm mind may focus. It is really a state of mind. One may think of the one point as the center of the universe. Since the universe is infinite, there is no single center, but rather infinite centers. Thus, each person's one point is the center of his or her own universe. So there are these different principles, and they're interpreted differently in different websites. So I'm going to read the one that amazed me the most first, and then I'll read the one that's kind of more typical. Number 1, do not feel the lower abdomen. Number 2, do not feel the weight of the body on your feet. Number 3, do not feel your breath. Number 4, let everything be absorbed into the one point. Number 5, send all the power from the one point. And then I think this is the same thing, but interpreted differently on a different website. Center on the one point in the lower abdomen where you cannot put tension. Let your body weight fall on your one point, not in your legs and feet. Your breathing is calm and subtle. You can accept whatever happens without losing your composure. And I'm going to read one more thing, and then we'll just open it up a little bit. Breathe out so that your breath travels infinitely to the ends of the universe. Breathe in so that your breath reaches your one point and continues infinitely there. So it's, Koichi Tohei was quite a guy, and doing a lot of reading, I realized how much of what is attributed to O Sensei actually came from Koichi Tohei. And because he interpreted O, this is my take on it, he interpreted O Sensei because he spoke English really well, and he wrote in English about things that mostly O Sensei, from what I understood from people who actually studied with him, he was very hard to understand, even for the Japanese, because he was so esoteric. And he talked a lot in very esoteric terms about things, and that Koichi Tohei really was able to make them more accessible. So these are different takes on Koichi Tohei's principles, and there's a bunch of other ones too, but I thought they were interesting because, you know, my original keep one point was just like, well, keep your concentration there and that makes you strong. But the way they're talking about it in some of these is much more than that. So I'm interested in your thoughts. If any of you have thoughts, I know particularly Greg and Ula, you've probably heard a lot of rhetoric around keep one point as we were coming up in the training. And Paul probably doesn't know the rhetoric as much, but that's good to have a fresh perspective on what I read and what you can imagine, Paul. So I'm interested if anyone, your thoughts on this view about keep one point and how it might inform us, both in our Aikido and in our conversations.
Okay. A lot of thoughts about it, especially because I'm doing a thing around, because often the ahara is related to the center of gravity or the center of mass, and that that point is actually dynamic. It's not one place, but every mass, every object has a center of mass. So it's this point of connection with everything. And no matter how far you break it down, it still has a center of mass until there is no mass. And so it is, to me, a representation of a connection to the universe. And
are you pointing to like the nucleus in an atom and things like that?
Any mass will have a center of gravity to it, will have a center to it.
Okay.
So no matter how far you break it down or how big you make it, they'll still have center of mass.
Okay.
And that's I had one teacher talk about the universe as being like a hologram. And so every piece has the whole in it. And the thing that every piece has is a center of mass. And so I relate to that centered point. So it's individual and universal at the same time.
That's kind of like the saying, one may think of one point as the center of the universe. Since the universe is infinite, there is no single center, but rather infinite centers.
Yep.
Kind of similar to that phrase.
But they all have the quality of the universe, and that it's dynamic potential, it's empty, it's kind of has a cognizance to it, because the center of mass actually shifts whenever we change our position, and so it knows where to go.
Yeah, cool. And I just want to follow on that just as long as you're on it. So, and how does that help or inform how we interact in life?
Well, kind of what also any force going through us, if it goes through that point, it moves our whole being. So if we're moving as if from there, it's going to move us in life. Also, I kind of play with imagining seeing the world through there. So it's that point is seeing itself out in the world. So I hear, like I'm seeing and hearing and sensing from that point.
I like it. Nice. Cool. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
Oh, that's been one of the best explanations of one point that I've ever heard. You broke it down like scientifically and in bite-sized chunks that I can understand it, right? And the way I've seen it, or the way teachers have, one of the best examples of it in showing up was Dan Masisko talking about it with his teacher, his Korean teacher, when I think he was stationed in Korea or something like that. And the teacher's like, oh, you guys are not understanding this. Like, the reason you can't do something to me because I'm standing this way in space. And he had somebody like take a rope and tie it around him. And then they pulled him up into like the rafters, and his shape didn't change at all. It wasn't like joints got loose or anything. Everything was just one mass in one way, right? Like it just moved all together.
Yes, I remember that story. So, he had people come and try to push him over, and of course they couldn't. He goes, why do you think? And then people said, oh, because you're grounded and this and that. And he goes, no, it's not any of that. It's just that this is the way I'm standing in space. So the way I interpreted it is you can't push space over.
Yeah.
And that was his Taekwondo teacher. And then after that, he went to try to find O-sensei, and O-sensei had passed, so he missed it. But yeah, no, Dan had some amazing training. Yeah. Ula, any thoughts?
No, I think I have to think about it some more. Sorry.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think what I'm most taken by as we had this discussion and I was doing that reading is originally my understanding was you keep your focus here and kind of that makes you strong. And this implication is so the way, and I couldn't find it. I went back and tried to find it, but I found it some months ago that apparently Koichi Tohei Sensei had said, you focus when you're doing this into your hara point, and you focus and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and then it opens out into the universe, which for me is a fantastic image of, going in and then opening out. So rather than it being kind of like a lead ball, which was how I was originally, it was pointed to me, kind of a lead ball that's really strong, that really stabilizes you and makes you so you can't push over. Instead, it has a feeling of emptiness, as Paul was saying, inherently empty, which I think is really remarkable in the idea of that being the ultimate power, the emptiness, rather than the there-ness of it or the strength of it. It's just like, because as was Greg was saying about Dan's story, is you can't attack emptiness, you can't push it over, you can't. So,
oh, I had one question.
Yes.
About, so if we think about the energy concentrating into a smaller and smaller space, and then it expands, if you were to apply that in a technique, that sounds like rather than the energy flowing through me, it's more like this way.
yes.
And this way, but not necessarily directionally just forward or backward or up or down. It's expanding in every which way you can think of. That's what it sounds like when you're.
And I agree. I think
and then you focus it at the end. It's like it does this, and then you can focus it. Does that make? I'm trying to put together sort of a little mini movie of it in action, I guess.
Well, when I studied with Takeda Sensei, he said there's gathering and expanding. And at the end of class, he used to have us lie on the floor and do these kind of sit-up things. And I thought he was just doing strengthening there. I said, no. It has nothing to do with that. He's having you practice gather and expand and gather and expand. And that we want to be able to go pa-boom.
Yeah.
And then there's the up and down, the kind of compress and then up, compress and up. And that it's very hard for us to do all four at the same time. So usually when I'm teaching, I try to work on just the gathering and then the expanding, like Kodavaish, gather and expand the Kodavaish.
And upwards for the
right. But then my view is that because we're so much beginners, we have to work on the gather expand piece and then the up and down piece, and then allow them to organize themselves rather than try to do them all at the same time. I don't think we're good at doing them all at the same time. But I think if we practice, that sense of down and up, and then that sense of in and out, that they might start to occur.
And I think also you've talked about thinking about the space behind you. That's kind of a way of expanding a bit, but not trying to do, multi areas.
Right.
So, but you are working with the space one way or another, whether it's here or there or back there. It is one thing, I guess, is what you're saying.
I think we're better at practicing one thing at a time than practicing a bunch of different things at a time. My understanding about the neuroscience is that we don't actually multitask and do a bunch of things at one time. We do things quickly rather than doing things at one time. So if we're learning, it's good to focus on, like, when I'm helping someone with their black belt and they get uke focused, then I'll ask them to think about the portal behind them. And if they put their attention there, then the idea is they can operate more intuitively, more fluidly. But to say, put your attention around the whole space, or, George used to say, own the mat, but it was too big for most people.
It is big.
Yeah. And so if you think, okay, well, let's start with behind us, or if someone's attacking yokemen, sometimes I'll look at the area on their right side and down there. So I think that's development. So for me, if I'm thinking about going into my center the way Paul described it, of mass, and having it be empty, and then imagining that it becomes universal, then the person that's attacking me is, since they said this, in an ideal sense, attacking the universe. But I don't have to do that. I can simply go in and then imagine it all opens up. But to do that, I have to practice concentrating on that, so that in the face of low-grade threat, when uke actually attacks me, I can keep that concentration, or I can engage in the concentration instead of jumping onto uke and trying to manage uke. So let's play a little bit with, Paul, do you have something? You look like you had a thought.
I'm having all kinds of stuff. Have you ever seen those expandable balls? They're small and then they just blow up into something big.
Yeah, they're kind of put together with a scaffolding, and they go big.
I have a couple of them, and one's about 3 or 4 feet big. I just see that, and it just goes out. And when you're saying that in and out, I was just playing with that, and it's like, wow, that sense of going in, but then out, and then that center, then connecting to all this other centers. So it's just like boom, boom, and this is, I don't know, it's just this fun feeling.
Well, I think we have that kind of ability to affect the environment. Our environment. We can shrink. We can, you're out in the world and you see somebody you don't want to talk to, you pull your energy in. And then if I'm out in the world and I see someone I haven't seen in a while and I want to connect with them, I come like, hey, Sally, wow, hi. My energy goes out. So we definitely have that capacity.
I think I'm seeing those images too, where they just, like, the attacker just seems like it's repelled. It almost seems like that's what's happening, is there's an in, and then it's like, boom, you're relating to the universe, and they just get blown out.
Yeah. So let's play with it. Let's start with a basic of kind of how most of us grew up, which is, let's just put our hands over our, what people say, 2 or 3 inches below the belly button, and kind of focus into a point there and imagine it's substantial, like old school. And then just move around a little bit. You can do a 2-step or just walk around and have a feeling of real substance, like that, like it's a lead ball or something. Okay, and let's just stop for a minute because I just want to touch into that. because that's kind of old school, and that's what a lot of people like to organize around something solid, something that they feel is strong. Let's change up now and have that start with that same area, but let's go in and make it smaller and smaller, and then have a sense that it opens out into like a universal, however you perceive your inside just opened out and became, I wouldn't call it empty of nothing, because I would say it's more like stardust in there or starlight, but whatever, however you perceive that. But like Paul pointed to, there's a reference point for a center of mass. And now let's walk around with that sense a little bit. Or let that walk around. The other way to say it, let that walk or move or turn. Okay, let's just stop for a minute. Let's do one more and then we'll have a check-in. So Paul's image of that thing that goes small and then large, that you pull in and out. So see if you can catch a pulse. Like everything pulses, right? If I say snap your fingers or you walk, we walk in a rhythm. Everything has rhythm, everything has pulse. Universe pulses. So see if you can catch a sense of a pulse. Could be like your heartbeat or your breath. I don't know, there'll be something. And it goes in and out, and in and out. And it's pulsing. And once you catch the pulse, then try moving around with that pulse. So it's still pulsing as you move a little bit or you turn if you do a two-step. Okay, and now let's just come back in for a minute and let's see if you notice any difference between the sense of solid, something inside us, the sense of expanding like a more open universe as the reference point, and then the pulsing. Anybody, what did you notice between those three, or was there a difference? Or
Definitely a difference. And the first one was just heavier feeling on my sort of joints and body, and and that's something I really appreciate about the direction you're taking your Aikido, sensei, is trying to find ways that you can still be effective but be light on your body as possible, right? And that's true in both the physical form and the lightness you can bring to conversations or bring to people you meet out on the street and that kind of thing, because there is a heaviness to living life, right? And especially now more than ever, because we're just bombarded by news 24/7 of bad things that are going on. So if you can have a little bit of lightness in your physical body that you also bring into your psychological and relationships and that kind of thing, it seems to be a better way to live.
yeah, I think it's close. I mean, George, I don't know if he coined the term, but talked about human potential. I feel like we have more access to our potential when we're in that state.
Yeah.
Both on the mat and off.
Well, in moving, you talked about focusing on something that pulsed, and the easy thing for me was my breath. Mm-hmm. So when I inhale, there's a contraction, a shrinking energy, and then when I exhale, it just balloons and lightens up. And when the contraction happens, I don't feel necessarily that I get heavy. It's just that the energy is kind of, well, it's in flux. When you're inhaling, I don't feel like I have that same power of expansion. It's a different thing that's going on. I'm not sure how to describe it, but when you inhale, when we strike, we don't inhale and strike, we exhale and we strike. Right. There's got to be a reason. I don't know the physiology behind it. I'm sure there's some kind of scientific reason, but you can feel it definitely. And I think that the way that you're teaching and focusing on this kind of way to utilize the key energy and not muscle, it's just so much more joy in that. I mean, it's as basic as that. I am, laughing throughout the whole training because I'm having so much fun, because it just feels so good, and light, and yet I feel focused and relaxed, all at the same time. And so it's just a really wonderful way to practice.
Thanks, Ula. And I agree. It's better on my body and my spirit in terms of not putting so much stress. Yeah. Thank you.
With the first one, I felt kind of a heaviness also, like Greg talked about, and more of a contained. And then with the second one, kind of going to a smaller and smaller point. I kind of was maybe thinking about the Stardust, but smaller and smaller, and I get to a certain small point, and all of a sudden it's like Stardust everywhere. So it's all kind of this shimmery. And when I think of that very tiny point and that as force is targeted through that, my whole body just flows, but it's at the same time connected to this expansion. And I kind of would, even in that one, started playing with it because it already felt the in and out while doing that. And then I found that the pulse was really slow so it was much slower than my heart rate, my breath, as far as the going in and then it going out. That was what I noticed there.
For me, I noticed when I was sort of, went in and then I opened out, it was tricky because it was hard not to space out. And that's something I know about being opening. It's like as I was kind of opening to the universe rather than the size of a room or something like that, I found myself starting to space out a little bit. I'm like, whoa. And there's something from an ego point of view that's comforting about a heavy metal ball in the heart. It's like there's a there. But I know in the grand scheme of things, that doesn't lead to what we were talking about in terms of life. But it did point to me when I was doing the pulsing, it was easier to manage than when I just went into the universe, which too open, too fast, almost always spaces me out. And that's something I want to keep working on, to be able to handle more and more openness without spacing out, more and more expansiveness. I think that's like building our capacity to be open. Because the limbic system doesn't want to do that. The neocortex thinks it's a good idea, but the limbic system doesn't want to do it. It wants to have its bubble and protect itself and have it there. So it takes development to be able to train the limbic system to go outside the window and, go to the end of the parking lot and that kind of thing. Anyway, that's what I'm working on. I want to go back to a couple of things because I thought this was so interesting. Do not feel the lower abdomen. Do not feel the weight of the body on your feet. Do not feel your breath. So I just thought that was so interesting as an instruction. Do not feel the lower abdomen. All I can think of is what they're pointing to is what Paul originally mentioned about emptiness. And the idea of weightlessness, like do not feel the weight of your body on your feet. That's like what we talked about last week with weight underside. It's like, don't feel the weight of your arm. What you want to pay attention to is the balance between what's above it and what's below it, the centrifugal and the gravitational energies. So anyway, I just thought it's such an interesting instruction. And your thoughts about do not feel your lower abdomen, do not feel the weight of your body on your feet, do not feel your breath. Any thoughts on that instruction? I kind of have my take on it, but I think it's a really counterintuitive instruction.
It seems like when you focus on those areas, you feel heavier through your joints and all the way down, and sort of bringing that sort of emphasis and focus. And we all know how to do that. Send the roots to the ground and be more grounded and having that feeling. But when you've experienced sort of the lighter side of moving during a technique or moving through life where it's not as heavy, the focus is different. And having something else to focus on is helpful, because it's hard to say in one way, I don't like the don't focus on the abdomen, don't focus on the feet, because then I'm thinking about my feet and my abdomen. I like the take that like there's something else like stardust or something else that I focus on.
Yeah.
Where that helps me be lighter.
I fully agree. It's the don't think of an elephant thing. It doesn't, telling somebody don't do something doesn't usually have the result we're looking for. Saying do this instead. And that's what you do with children too. Don't touch that. You say, hey, come over and play with this. Is usually a better way to redirect a child.
Well, I've done that with my nephews, and I'm like, here, touch this hot stove. And then they look at me like I'm crazy. Like, no, it's hot. I'm like, no, just put your hand on it. It's good.
So if, as Greg is pointing to, we want to point people on what to. So what do we focus on if we're not focusing on sensations in our body?
Well, two things that come to mind are, one is the stardust thing again, is I just kind of get this shimmery like glitter and everything, and it's all made up of that. And the space, because if you think about focus on the space, well, the space is surrounding every one of those bits of thing that all have a center to them. So they're all suspended in space.
That's nice. Yeah.
The other image I thought of earlier too is it's kind of like a snow globe, but from the center, it's kind of like all the glitter goes back to the center, and then it just kind of blows out, floats around, then settles back in there, and then blows out again.
Yeah, you have to shake it up, but yes. I have a Buddha snow globe that I love. It's a silvery one, and the Buddha's like a crystal Buddha, and you shake it, and there's little silver sparkles all over that just settle around the Buddha. It's really cool. Anyone else, besides what Paul was pointing to, have any ideas of what you can focus on besides sensations in your body?
Yeah, the new one for me is focusing on stardust, since it's everywhere, and that's scientifically proven, and my brain tends to like that. But then also practically focusing on the rhythms, the sort of like there's this sort of rhythm to things, and we can really feel it and see it. You can do it getting up and out of a chair, but for me, I can really feel it doing kemi, right? My kemi has this sort of like flow to it and a rhythm to it, and I can catch this sort of wave, and it feels effortless in those moments.
Right. When I can catch the wave, it feels effortless, but sometimes I get I block myself, as it were. Any thoughts about what you would focus on, or what?
Well, I think in the past we've talked about empty mind. So what I do a lot, you know how we talk about a reset after each technique, you kind of go, or you touch, and it's a way, I don't come like back to a center where it's heavy. It just goes still. Like I just go empty mind. What do they call that? Still water, just still.
How nice.
And that's where I like to start out each time, because it's a great reset. And I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just trying to be there. I don't want to think about anything. I just want to be in the moment and ready to receive, kind of just open, but not, oops, sorry, dog, but in a passive way. And that's kind of how I deal with it. Shh, go to shh.
Maybe he has something to say. He's got a thought on what to focus on besides dinner and affection.
Exactly. So that's what I utilize if I don't, and even, when we're doing a technique, like Taino Henko, and you're not supposed to focus on this, right? It's just supposed to be this space that you float around. And that was so hard for me not to pay attention to that, especially from static, and you got someone who's really heavy. So the best I could do was empty mind at that point and work my way around it. And so that's still something I'm working on, because for me, it's, for some people that I train with, it's really hard to get around and Taino Henko, if you know what I mean.
I do. I totally do. I remember one time Terry Dobson was holding my wrist, and he was getting me to do that, and I couldn't, because I was in so much pain. Tears started coming down he was holding, and he takes a lighter out of his gi, and he puts the lighter under my fingers, and I went like that. He goes, "See, I told you could move easily." He always had props, but he would be willing to do anything to prove his point. So put your attention on the pain, and then you're not focusing on the pain of the lighter as opposed to the pain of his grip. But I like the idea of stillness. It's beautiful. For stillness, I think of a still moon reflecting in a pool, and that has enough of a sort of a pull that I can keep my attention on it. Because my concentrations, whether it's Stardust or whatever, they have to be attractive enough that I can stay with it for a little bit. Otherwise I get distracted by the attack or the other person or the news or whatever else is going on.
Lula reminded me of the stillness in that it started with in my meditation practice, where it's eyes open and just sort of observing, right? But then being able to do that, observing the thoughts, the things that come up, the different stories that come through. For me, there's a lot of building, construction, planning, that kind of stuff. But then letting a lot of that go and just observing for what things are as they exist, and not adding labels of I like this, I don't like that, I am pleased by this, right? Just going through more and more. And in Aikido, it's helpful because there's so much judging. Did I do the technique right? Didn't feel right? And it's just observing. There's no right or wrong, just observing what it is. And then seeking the qualities that I'm sort of seeking has been helpful.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, noticing that we're doing something is the first step to being able to do something else. Change, make a shift. We have to first notice.
Yeah, it reminds me of like a snake. A snake will sometimes just observe the world, as like the world exists. And there's nothing, doesn't seem like there's anything else going on inside that snake's mind unless it's like food.
Yeah, and they can be still.
Yeah.
Cool.
And maybe not just focusing on one part of the body allows us to be more open to really seeing what is happening in that moment and being more observant or more responsive to it too. That's all I wanted to say.
No, I agree with that. I think, last week Kat was in the thing about when I close my eyes, I can feel myself more. And I'm like, yes, and that's not the point, because we're not trying to get into a self. We're actually trying not to get into the self because it's limited. And there's nothing wrong with it. We're not going to get rid of it, that's for sure. But to spend 98% of our time there is, it's frustrating and it's limited. Whereas what we're talking about with having access to the starlight or the space or the stillness, we're tapping a whole nother resource that's all around us, the universe, so to speak, as opposed to personal. So let's get our bokens and we'll do a little boken intention. Okay, let's start by stirring the cosmic soup. Let's invite wisdom traditions from all times, all places, and all eons to come and support our intentions for good in the world, enlightening ride the heaven and bringing it into us. Oh. And then in some of my reading, one of the things that other points was working with the boken is to hold it lightly. And I know that I've seen what happens when I grip it too strong. I don't have as much response. So as you're just holding the boken and you stand and we're getting ready to, let's do a little kesa cutting, right? So see if you can just have a sense that you're holding the boken lightly, that you can just move it easily, like the tip around, and that your hands have a light grip, almost like you're losing it, just to play with that a little bit, that lightness. And then let's do a few kesa cuts of just letting it fall. And to do this, I almost have to hold it very lightly to feel the flow and let the boken lead the way, the tip of the boken. And let my leg pull the tip of the boken down. And feel the lightness in my hands. Imagine the boken is empty. It's not very heavy. 2 more. And then just stop for a moment. See if you can stand in that and feel the sense of flow. And again, when you're holding it, see if you can hold it lightly. So don't put the weight in the boken. And then let's not put weight in our feet. Let's see if we can have a sense of the universe opening out, maybe pulsing if that one worked for us, or opening and flowing through us. We're weightless. Ready? Let's say our intentions out loud. Ready, and I wish to bring joyful perseverance into the world. And let's send it out. I wish to bring joyful perseverance to the world. Send it out. I wish to bring joyful perseverance to the world. Cut, and again, and now ki. Hi! Nice. Let's double check again. We don't have weight in our feet. The boken feels weightless. We're either pulsing or opening out and stardust flowing through us. Ready, and I wish to bring joyful perseverance to the world. Send it out. I wish to bring joyful perseverance to the world. Send it out. I wish to bring joyful perseverance to the world. Cut. Again. And a ki. Hey! Sensing it going out. Let's do one more. Double check that we don't have weight in our feet, that our boken feels light, that we can sense stardust around us or the stillness, the pulsing, saying our intention, and I wish to bring joyful perseverance to the world. Send it out. I wish to bring joyful perseverance to the world. Send it out. I wish to bring joyful perseverance to the world. Cut. Again. And last ki. Hey! Sensing it flowing around us, through us. Starlight, stardust, the lightness. Let's put our bokens to the side and bow them out. And let's end with a little heaven and earth breathing. Taking a moment to sense the lightness, the openness around us, and then reaching down, drawing from the earth, reaching up to the heavens and radiating out to the world. Earth, sky, connecting all around the planet. Sending good energy. The ki shimmering around us and through us. Let's do two more. And then let's stand in it for a moment. Radiating all the light, stardust, connecting us to everything in the entire planet. And then a moment of appreciation for our community, people all around the globe. Moment of care for those who are struggling and suffering in the globe. Appreciation for our friends and training partners, for our teachers and mentors, for O Sensei's vision, and our own hearts. Let's bow out. Domo arigatou gozaimashita. So thank you all for being here and for having this cool discussion. I've been really enjoying it and learning a lot. And thank you, Greg, as always, for hosting. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Sensei. This is good.
Yeah, thank you, Sensei. Very, very interesting. I really enjoyed these sessions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've been learning a lot too, just doing, looking up stuff and researching. Oh, look, that's what that said and this said, and it's been really good. Thinking a little more deeply about some of these principles. So next week, same time. I'm not sure what the theme will be. We already did the 4 points, but there are some other ones. So I might either maybe go over, do one where all the 4 together and touch in some of the points we touched into. It's best if I decide kind of the day before, because then it's more Because a lot of times if I decide too far before, then somehow time during the week, and then it changes. And then I'm stuck with the decision that I made. So I'd rather wait and have it be more spontaneous. Unless anyone has a request, in which case, as you know, I love the requests. So meanwhile, have a wonderful rest of your evenings, and I hope all is well. And we're going to have fun with our tractor.